Hey. So I feel like I owe a lot to Luka Doncic. I'd easily say that I've been a fan of the NBA and just basketball in general for most of my life now, but I didn't really get truly invested into it until the Luka Doncic draft cycle came around. And that's because when I first saw his EuroLeague tape, I just immediately had this feeling that he was going to be a really special player in the league. But when I looked around at other, social medias and just other people talking on Twitter and just everywhere in person, all that stuff, there seemed to be a whole lot of people doubting him, and I wasn't sure why. And I by no means am trying to serve any slander to DeAndre Ayton, but to this day, I still believe that Luka Doncic should have been the clear #1 pick in that draft. But since that point, overall, I've just gotten way more into the NBA. I'm really happy for it. It honestly helped me start up this whole YouTube thing. So of course, when I see one of my favorite players in the league and Luka Doncic go out and sign a huge max extension, of course, I'm going to be very, very happy for him. But what that also means is that the clock has officially started ticking for the Dallas Mavericks to go out there and actually support him with a good roster. Because so far in his career, Luka has put up some amazing numbers, but he hasn't necessarily had the best supporting cast to help him go out and win, especially during the playoffs. Because at this point, I think it's pretty clear that Luka Doncic is a special player in the NBA. He's going to go down as one of the all-time greats, of course, unless something crazy happens. But most of all, there's a whole lot of people out there who just want to see the man win some damn rings at this point. And with that, I know there are plenty of people out there just like me who will not hesitate to slander Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks if they're not able to help him deliver a ring to Dallas, or else, once Luka requests a trade or goes to another team, I know at least I will for sure be backing Luka no matter what. So again, huge congrats to Luka on the big extension. He's absolutely 100% deserved it. So with Luka in check for the next 4 or 5 years, it's time to take a look at where are the Dallas Mavericks currently standing with their roster and how are they faring in the Western Conference right now. And speaking of Mark Cuban, he recently dropped a quote where he said that he feels the roster has considerably improved this offseason. And while I like the optimistic thinking, I just can't agree with that. I don't by any means believe that they've had a bad offseason or that they've not improved at all, but I think their improvements have been very, very marginal for the most part. When looking at the current roster, the only key players that they've lost this offseason are Josh Richardson and James Johnson, two guys who won't exactly be missed by a whole lot of Dallas Maverick fans. Throughout his lone season in Dallas, Josh Richardson averaged 12 points on 54% true shooting, and eventually was pretty much phased out of the rotation by the time the playoffs came around, and ultimately just had a really, really bad year. Now, there has been a whole lot of slander on Josh Richardson because of this season, and I don't by any means think that he's as bad as the guy that we saw in Dallas this past year, but clearly the fit wasn't right. I think it was a good idea for them to part ways and move on. And then James Johnson, he's James Johnson. He's a journeyman. He's been around the league for a long time now with many teams. I want to say he's like 35, 36, so he's easily replaceable. He's not that big of a loss at all. And then outside of that, pretty much the entire roster from last season is going to be coming back to run it again. At the guard spot, you're going to have Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson, Trey Burke, and Tim Hardaway, who also re-signed this offseason. At the wing position, you have Maxi Kleber, Dorian Finney-Smith, who I was shocked to see is only making $4 million this season, which is an absolute steal for the Dallas Mavericks. Plus, Josh Green should be getting some more run this year as a sophomore, which should be pretty exciting for Mavericks fans. And then for bigs, you're looking at Kristaps Porzingis, Dwight Powell, Willie Cauley-Stein, and of course, Boban will be making a return to the roster as well. So again, you're looking at pretty much the same roster that just took the Western Conference finalists LA Clippers to a competitive 7-game series in the first round of the playoffs and had a pretty good lead in that 7th game, but ultimately just ran out of gas. Plus, it wasn't like they sat back and did absolutely nothing this offseason. They did go out and make a few additions who, they won't exactly be needle movers or, make them into contenders on the spot. But like I said, I think they're good marginal additions that will definitely help the roster. First, they added another wing to the lineup when they signed Reggie Bullock to a 3-year, $30 million deal. Bullock is fresh off a really good season with the New York Knicks where he averaged 11 points per game, but more importantly shot 40% from 3 on 6 attempts per night, which is very good, at top of the league kind of stuff. And once he steps on the court to start the regular season, I'd have to say he's probably the best and most consistent shooter that Luka Doncic will have played with his entire career, so that should be pretty exciting for Mavericks fans that Luka is finally getting a dead-eye shooter to catch and shoot his passes. Then the other notable addition the Dallas Mavericks had was they signed Sterling Brown to a 2-year, $6 million deal. So again, like I said, nothing too crazy in the free agency department, but some good marginal adds. But I'm actually pretty excited to see what Sterling Brown can add to this roster. He just had a sort of a breakout year himself where he played in Houston and he was able to just kind of play freely, get up some shots that he wouldn't have been able to take back when he played on Milwaukee or some of the other teams he's played on. And overall, he averaged 8 points and 4 rebounds a game, and again, more importantly, was another 40% shooter, and he was on 4 attempts per game. So again, just more shooting that's being added to a roster that hasn't necessarily had, dead-eye shooters in the past. Plus, unlike Reggie Bullock, Sterling Brown is actually a very solid defender and will definitely help out at defending at the guard spot because the Mavericks have not necessarily been too great at that in recent years. Again, I'm just very excited to see the lineups that the Mavericks are going to be able to roll out with Sterling Brown now on the roster because he's 6'5" with a solid frame, meaning that he can be able to lock down some guards, but also be able to slot over to the wing if necessary. So at the end of the day, even though the roster has definitely not considerably improved like Mark Cuban said, I really still do believe in Dallas to finish with a better record than they did last season, and here's why. For starters, Luka Doncic is only heading into his 4th NBA season and should probably be taking another leap. Even though he's already an amazing player, he's still only 22 and has plenty of years left until he hits his peak. He was the favorite to win MVP at this point in time last offseason, and I wouldn't expect any of that to change for this year. Not to mention, going into last season, there's also the issue that he came into training camp a little bit out of shape, and it was very noticeable at the start of the season. He was fatigued, he wasn't playing as good as he had the previous year, and just overall he looked slow. But that really shouldn't be an issue this year, as this offseason has a pretty quick turnaround. Plus, he was just playing in the Olympics with Team Slovenia, so he hasn't had much time off. That whole issue should not be a thing again this year. I expect the Mavericks to not get off to a terrible start again. Overall, Luka should probably be looking as dominant as ever. Another reason is that it's not always a bad thing to keep a similar roster from season to season. Everyone already knows how to play together, they know their tendencies, and you don't have to waste time trying to form chemistry or learn how to play with one another. At this point, they can just slot in Bullock, slot in Sterling Brown, 2 guys who don't need the ball to perform at their highest levels, so the Mavs can get straight to work with the same proficiency that they had last season. And another point that I want to bring up at the end of this video is that they have a new head coach in Jason Kidd after they fired Rick Carlisle. Actually, I take that back. They didn't fire Rick Carlisle. They parted ways, if I'm not mistaken, so I just clear things up. But overall, I've never been impressed with Jason Kidd as a head coach. I think he did a pretty terrible job in his last stint in Milwaukee. But after seeing the many reports about the rifts and relationships between Rick Carlisle and a whole bunch of the players from the team, I do think that Jason Kidd coming in and just building good relationships and overall just having a bit more cohesion with the players in the roster could definitely be a much better thing for the Mavericks this season. Plus, not to mention, the West does strangely feel a little bit more open than it usually does. When looking back at last year's standings, Utah will most likely be in the mix again, Phoenix will be back and hungry with a chip on their shoulder, Denver will probably still be pretty good, but they have Jamal Murray who's continuing to rehab as the season approaches, the Clippers are going to be without Kawhi Leonard for probably at least a few months, and the Lakers only have 4 returning players, so they're definitely going to need some time to get their roster figured out. This is a typical thing that happens with LeBron teams when there's a lot of roster turnaround. It usually takes them at least a month or 2 to really get things going, so I'm expecting a few rough patches for them here and there. So with all this in mind, I don't think it's at all that unrealistic to say that Dallas could be looking at a top 3 seed in the West, come playoff time. Obviously, this may be a little bit of a hot take. They'll definitely need a whole lot of things to go right for them, but at the end of the day, I believe in Luka. I believe in him to take another leap and be playing at an entirely new level that we're yet to see from him, and if he does end up doing that, there's only one thing that the rest of the Dallas roster has to do, and that is simply just to not be bad, which I know has been a struggle in the past for them, unfortunately, but I'm feeling a little optimistic as we head into this new season. And if you've made it to this point in the video, then congratulations, you're a real one. Now if you enjoyed this video, maybe think about hitting the subscribe button, should be somewhere in this general direction. Or if you're not sure yet, maybe check out another video which should be in this general direction. Either way, thank you for watching.